Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special episode of Am I the Asshole podcast. I dare say this is among the most special of the most special, folks, because we are joined today by our one of my favorite patrons. She is Nicci from Colorado. Nicci, welcome to the show.
Oh, well, you didn't tell me you're going to compliment me. Now I'm all like flustered and shit. Thank you, though.
That's adorable. Last time you did the show, we talked a little bit about your erotica, but today we're going to a much more heavy place, folks. We're going to a very, very different place with this. And what we're talking about is borderline personality disorder.
Sorry, I just want to put a quick disclaimer out. I'm only speaking about my experiences through therapy and my limited knowledge as someone who has it, not like someone who treats it or has educated myself about it.
Very reasonable disclaimer. Something that I would see. The thing is, if I disclaimed, I just have to disclaim constantly because I just default to this tone of authority. So it would just be constant. I mean, look, I have been actually involved with psychology because I used to transcribe my dad's evaluations. And so I had been hearing about borderline personality disorder for a long time. I think in the kind of popular wisdom, it's thought of as, I think this is the origin of the term. It's thought of as the borderline between neurotic and psychotic. But I think that's kind of an outdated concept of it. I actually prefer the clusters version. There's different clusters of personality disorders, and it's cluster A, B, C. I forget how it goes exactly, but it's cluster B. And cluster B is the wild. The borderline personality disorder, the antisocial, the narcissists, the histrionics. What say you, Nicci?
One way I've heard it described that I really enjoyed is a sociopath is someone with not enough emotion. Someone with borderline has too much emotion, almost.
And the relationships with people of this ilk tend to start with love bombing, which I love to be love bombed. Let me just say, it is a wonderful thing, and a lot of people confuse it with being in love, which it is admittedly similar, but you tend to say things like, wow, I've never met anyone like you, and it goes a little bit higher than normal love. I believe I've also felt normal love, and it was very nice, but the love bomb is also very fast. Oh, it's so fast, this can all happen within 30 days or even less than that, and really just comes on so quick, and you're like, wow, we're meant to be, and I barely even know you, and that's why it feels really intense and wonderful. But you told me, Nicci, you said I have borderline, but I'm not a love bomber. I thought that was interesting.
Here's the thing. In our past conversations, I have said that I don't love bomb people.
Yeah.
And I still feel that way. I've thought about it. I just can't think of any instances that I've love bombed someone, but I have internalized that. I have felt like this person is the person for me. Wow, I don't know if anyone else would ever treat me this good. And often I'm very wrong about those assumptions.
And all these things are on spectrums, and they manifest in different ways as well. But it sounds to me like that's idealization. It's just that you don't externalize the idealizing. You just keep that in your head. And you're telling me you'll have these thoughts very early into a relationship about someone you don't really know.
Often, sometimes before I even meet them, just when we're talking, I'll be like, wow, that's really cool. And it can be very intense. There's times where I've, dated someone for a month and I'm like, wow, this thing that's in my distant future, we could do that together, or he would fit in or she would fit in with that well. And
but that seems pretty normal. I mean, you're imagining future plans with them. I mean, I certainly do that. Do you feel like it goes above and beyond at any point? I mean, you're saying a month in. I mean, that's not crazy to imagine a future plan a month in.
I'm going to out myself really quick. I'm talking more like wow, we could be forever. Like, I want to move here. He could be happy here. He could do this because this is what he wants to do in life. Or she can make a life here. She could be happy here. I want to do this thing in the future. She would fit into that perfectly. It might be idealization, but it's also very intense. Like, I want this person to be mine forever. And this is my planning kind of tentatively on how to make that happen.
Oh, okay. So you're actually planning to keep them forever at that point. It's not just a fantasy.
It's not just a fantasy. It's this is how I want the future to go. This is my ideal future, and this is what I will be working towards.
Oh, damn. Okay, yeah, no, that is different. Because if I have a thought like that, I'll be like, oh, I could see us doing this maybe. And then I'll always kind of double back and be like, let's just see what happens. This feels a little rushed. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. I keep it all inside, which I think helps.
Yeah.
Helps keep the relationships healthier. It doesn't necessarily help me. Yeah, it's less of a, oh, I want to go on vacation here. They might enjoy that because they like warm weather. It's like a, well, eventually I'd like to have a second house in Italy. Like, I wonder if they're good at learning other languages. Like, they could probably pick up Italian pretty good. They're smart. It's like,
The other side of the coin is, so you get this love bombing and this idealizing, and then this turns into devaluing, which is sort of like, oh, fuck you, big time. It's kind of this bizarre, intense switch, where it's like, well, what about all the good shit that was happening? And then they're like, no, you're horrible, and it gets very intense. And you told me that you kind of relate with this, but this is kind of a mark of borderline people and narcissist people. Where are you on the devaluing?
so I've gotten better over time at just keeping myself accountable and going to therapy and learning that the people closest to me, it's not as simple as, oh, you slighted me, I'm done with you. There was
But you've had that feeling.
oh no, absolutely. And there have been times where I've cut off people who weren't close to me that maybe didn't necessarily do something worth getting cut out, but I was like, nope, I'm done. I feel nothing for you.
What was the level of slight? Like, are we talking about, what kind of slight are we talking about here?
I'm talking someone couldn't come over one night when we had plans for a reason that I deemed was kind of
Holy shit.
this is a while ago. Okay, I haven't done this recently, but
No, I love it.
couldn't come over for a reason that I deemed wasn't an acceptable reason. Like, it was just kind of like a slight, I guess. And I was just like, oh, well, we're just friends. Like, I don't need someone who's going to cancel on me all the time. Like, bye.
And that's it. You ended the friendship at that point.
Yes, but a more recent example is I had a fight with my sister, and I had the headspace. I would actually be okay if we never talked again because I didn't like how this happened. Eventually, as I worked past it, I reached out to her and we reconnected and we're good now. But there was that moment where I was like, yeah, I don't even need my sister who's my best friend. Like, it's fine. I'll be, okay. And it's I realize I'm very wrong in those instances, but it's still there, and it's
right. Well, that's what strikes me about you. And, again, I should disclaim here, but I'm not going to. As a psychologist myself,
Dr. Danny.
What I notice about you, though, and we're going to get into this, but it's that, you're able to see the impulse, and you see the impulse. And frankly, I think that, whatever neurotypical people or however you put it, I think a lot of us have a lot of these impulses, and it really is about impulse management. That's where a lot of these things live. And that's why I think you're probably fairly low on the spectrum, as it were, because you're saying, like, I had the impulse to cut my sister out of my life forever. I got out of that headspace and I was like, clearly that's not a solution here. But I think all of us do have thoughts like, oh, this person did something wrong. How about no for life? I'll have that thought occasionally if someone really irks me, but I'm not going to do anything about it.
It goes back to feeling things at 100%,
You told me this other thing about your feelings where you're like, you can't imagine feeling another way when you're in a feeling. That really spoke to me.
When I'm in like a deep, deep state of that feeling, yes. One of the reasons I feel like people see my experience with borderline and feel like it's one of the more manageable cases is just because I've worked very hard to become aware of it, to be aware of my symptoms, to be aware of my actions, to be aware of my reactions. And I would push back a little bit at the idea that I may not be as deep in the spectrum as you may think, just because I am aware of what I experience, because you can't really be accountable. I'm aware of what's coming when I can recognize it, but even then, sometimes I don't. So I keep myself very aware, and I've learned to recognize the behaviors that often precede getting into one of those deep emotional states or cutting someone off who doesn't necessarily deserve it. I've worked very hard to get to this point, but I promise you, just because I internalize it, it does not make it any less intense or all-consuming.
Well, absolutely, and I apologize if that came off in any way as, kind of reducing the intensity. And I didn't mean to say that you're not, you don't suffer for it or that you haven't put a lot of work into it.
Yeah, I think you mean, I definitely think you meant well. It's how we live with our mental illnesses is not necessarily dependent on how we experience them. You know,
Totally.
some people, before I even knew I had borderline, I was completely wild and out of control, and I treated people incredibly poorly. Through time, I've been able to manage and internalize and process those symptoms better. But man, if you saw me before I even knew what I had, you would be amazed at what a different person I was back then.
I frankly am amazed, and I will admit also that I'm both projecting because I think for me, having been involved with personality disordered individuals, I have found as a kind of coping belief that it was easier for me to think of them as kind of intractably into that. It was just made it easier for me to honestly forgive and forget, because it's just like, that's not going to change, and I accept that. And I'm sorry for projecting that onto you. And most of the literature around this will say that these things are manageable, but not really necessarily treatable. But I think it's a very young science in terms of treatment and stuff like that. Because I have to say, as you've been telling me this, I remember we have another listener who said exactly what you said, that she would would blame everything on her partners, and she caught herself and she was like, what am I doing? This is, she became aware of her behavior and completely changed it around, and did that with therapy.
It's almost like something just creeps over your skin and kind of clouds your mind, and you're there, you're present, but it's not quite you. It's something more than you, almost controlling you. It is absolutely on me. I am responsible for my behaviors and how I treat people and the consequences of those things. But at times it does feel like I am not in control. I'm there, it's me, but something is kind of pulling the strings, and I still experience that clouded judgment where I'm acting a certain way and I'm treating people a certain way that isn't okay. And I'm not quite aware of it until I'm aware of it. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to take a step back, and then I need to apologize and intend to do better and then do better.
See, I guess a lot of what you say, I go, well, I do that. I think I'm having a great time. I'm roasting people. And then later someone goes, hey, man, you really hurt Roger's feelings back there with your little joke about his hat. He actually really likes that hat. And you kept saying it was a tiny hat. And then I got to go, oh, fuck, I really wasn't paying attention. I thought I was killing, and I was actually hurting his feelings. And you're basically saying that. So is it the intensity? Is it what about that mental state that you're in? Like, is it when you're reflecting, are you like, oh, I'm in a completely new feeling? Or like, yeah, what kind of is different about those states for you?
So I'm going to take your example and go with it.
Perfect.
Making
Perfect. Roger.
Making jokes about someone's hat, trying to like, oh, that's a funny hat. Like, you're aware that's a funny hat, right? Haha. That's one thing, even if you're being insensitive. Something
Right.
that I might do if I didn't stop myself, something I had the impulse to do, would be to make fun of his hat, because I know he likes that hat. I know making fun of that hat would hurt him deeper than another way I could hurt him. So it's kind of like, you hear these things and you're like, well, that's not that bad. But then imagine it turned up to 100 and you're like, oh yeah, that's bad.
Well, see, that's making me associate into is if I were to tell you, I say, hey, Nicci, one of my deepest secrets is that I was bullied tremendously as a child for having a tiny hat, and it devastates me. Is that the link you're talking about, that you would know that was a seriously vulnerable point and you would then nuke me with that?
It wouldn't even have to be that. It wouldn't even have to be that deep. It could just be like, I was there when he bought it. He was so excited to show it to everyone. And then once he's in the group, I'm like, that's a stupid hat. Why would you even think to wear it? It doesn't even look good on you. I'm not saying I would do this. I have never done something like this, but it's something it's something similar to an impulse I might feel, just to get them where it hurts the most, and where it'll hurt.
But why? Why are you having the impulse? Is it, you're saying if this person has wronged you, or just as a directionless attack?
If I feel they wronged me, possibly. They don't even have to wrong me, but maybe they made a joke at my expense that they didn't think was that bad, and I'm like, well, I'm going to get them now. I know.
Got it.
Even if I know it's a joke, if I didn't like how it made me feel, I might be like, well, let's turn this on
yes.
you. Now you're going to suffer.
Yeah, so it's kind of like they threw a dig at you. You didn't like being dug. It was clearly lighthearted, but now you're going to draw blood.
Yeah.
I feel that. I feel that for sure. I mean, I definitely have hostility when I feel insecure, so I relate with this. But I think it's all the intensity, the degree. But yeah, I wanted to talk about this. So we talk about gaslighting a lot, and I have to say, I'm very impressed because you told me that you have gaslit someone and used to double down and never admit you were wrong and gaslit, and you become aware of it, and now you don't let yourself do it. And I just first of all want to applaud you for taking ownership, because I think that's incredible. But yeah, how did that play out to where you were actually gaslighting someone?
So we would have disagreements. He was my closest friend. This person I had this friend I was very close to. We only knew each other online. We would have the occasional disagreement, and I would just, once we had the disagreement, it would just escalate to a fight, and I would escalate that fight further until she would just back down and be like, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel that way. And it's that sounds like a passive aggressive apology, but that's how you have to apologize when you have done nothing wrong, And at the time of this friendship, I didn't even know what gaslighting was, but the problem with learning from your mistakes is that you have to make the mistakes, and you're going to hurt people before you can change the way you act and the way you treat people. And because
That's
of
powerful.
Yeah, because of that, because of treating her the way I did, abusing her the way I did, and then her standing up for herself and saying, no, I don't want you in my life anymore. And then going to therapy and discovering what borderline is and acknowledging and learning my triggers and my symptoms. And I have never done anything like that before, and nothing since. And I'm very proud to say that, but I lost someone I cared about deeply, and it was entirely my fault. And so while talking to me today, you can tell that I've learned these lessons, and I've worked on myself, and I've tried to treat my symptoms in a way that I can live normally and I can function in everyday life without people necessarily picking up on that I'm mentally ill. All that came from a lot of inflicted pain on other people, and having to acknowledge that I hurt people and do better in the future.
Well, that's amazing. You're making me feel emotional, and I'm really proud of you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna cry laughing.
2 for 2. Got to end a crime. Both of my guests.
Hey, you open up, and it feels good. I mean, I think that's a huge thing to admit, and it also felt good to hear, because I was told to get therapy by someone, and I thought, I don't agree, but I'll err on the side of caution, and you maybe didn't view it that exact way, but therapy can never hurt. And so it's always great to go and have these insights, and try to work through what happened and how you've affected people and what's happened in your life. So I think it's amazing that you did that.
Earlier you said it can be managed but not treated, or something similar to that. And that's because there is no medication to treat borderline. You just need to kind of do what I did and seek therapy, seek help, be aware, be accountable. And and if people don't have those resources, I didn't have those resources when I had that friendship. That doesn't excuse my behavior, but after having those resources and seeking out additional ones, I am in a place where I can have healthy relationships, and I don't have to worry about, am I being manipulative? Am I abusing someone? Am I being a healthy friend?
Yeah, I think you're right. There is no pill you can take. But there are especially for borderline, I know there's different kinds of therapy that can work, and stuff like that. I think it's amazing. I think going back to the gaslighting thing, I'm curious, I guess a thought I have is when I think about some of the interactions I've had, I'm like, did they know? Like, do they know that they're totally lying? Because it doesn't come from the place. Like, if I were to lie to someone, I'd have a little calculation in my head where I'd be like, okay, they're going to be angry if I tell them that what's really true. So I'll tell them what's not really true, and then they'll be less angry. And I kind of run that in my head, and then I have to perform it, and I fail. That's why, honestly, I don't lie, because I'm a terrible liar, and I get so anxious, and so I'm just very honest. But when you're kind of like gaslighting someone, do Do you have thoughts like that, or is it almost like reality is kind of warped in a way? Because it doesn't feel like it comes from a calculating place. Does that make sense?
For me personally, it comes very naturally. Borderline is theorized to be a form of PTSD due to the fact that so many people who have it experienced trauma in their childhood, which is something I experienced. So when I find myself gaslighting, it comes very naturally. I had a lot of trauma in my childhood. A lot of people with borderline do. And so from a very young age, I learned to be very manipulative and the kind of secrets to how to get what I want from people. And I think that trauma that taught me that is a part of why I developed borderline. And so I don't want to say manipulation comes easy to me, although I don't think that's not accurate. I think that could be said. So when I get into those modes where I feel like something is controlling me or pulling the strings behind the scenes, it just comes naturally. It comes like out. It is harsh. It is effective for hurting people, which is usually my intent when I do that. So it's not like let's think about what to say. It's like this is what I'm feeling, so this is what I'm going to say right now.
So I mean, I think it kind of stands out then. So yeah, it's not really a calculation. It feels very natural because it's a response to something that happened to you. So it's a learned behavior or a coping mechanism that's been with you for a while. So it's very natural.
It's like when you yell at someone when you're arguing, and you just say something to hurt them or you didn't mean. It's like it comes out naturally, but it's a very much calmer, very colder, very direct way of attacking.
I mean, that's good. I'm happy you went to yelling because I am a yeller. I will yell. And I really yell when I feel like I'm not being heard. I've pinned it down usually to that. I'm not going to just start yelling if I'm losing an argument. But if I'm not getting anywhere with the person to where it's like I'm talking to a wall, then I will start to yell.
I'm actually the same way. Back to the childhood thing, my household was very loud and chaotic. And so I don't like yelling, but if someone talks over me and will not let me get a word in and keeps interrupting me, I will shout. I will be like, stop it or shut up. And then I will remove myself from the situation. So I understand that impulse of I have no other choice but to raise my voice and be heard.
Yeah. I wanted to just make a final point because I think this is something that I've chewed on a lot about personality disorders because, there's this whole dilution going on where everyone's like, I went to Walgreens and the clerk gaslit me into buying cigarettes. It's like these words, oh, my friend's a narcissist. He posts a lot of selfies. And I don't like it. I understand it, obviously, but I guess I've always really believed that, is it vain to post a selfie? Yes. And would a classical narcissist post a lot of selfies? Sure. But I really think, and this is kind of evidenced by what you're saying, is that these personality disorders, really they're diseases of intimacy. They're disorders of intimacy more than anything. And I thought I was curious how you said that about your best friend. She was really the closest person to you. And that's where this came out. And it didn't really come out in other places. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, I would actually say she was the closest person to me, possibly the only person I was close to. I didn't even have a good relationship with my sister at the time. So focusing all my attention and all my affection and all of my emotion onto her certainly did not help keep healthy boundaries in a healthy relationship.
I mean, and it makes sense too, just again, going to this childhood place where you go, well, a child's, two closest bonds are with their parents, and those really are their primary bonds. And so, so then it's like, oh, well, where do these kind of coping mechanisms replicate? In the most primary, relationships. They're not to some rando on the street. It's really lives in this very specific place. Nicci, thank you so much for sharing. I'm really blown away. I'm really proud of you, and I think it's amazing. I think in a world where people won't cop to shit, and you're just like, yeah, I did this. You're taking ownership, and you worked on it, and you made it better. And that's an amazing story that everyone should hear.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
You're the best. Well, guys, we're going to actually weirdly lighten the tone. We're going to actually weirdly lighten the tone, guys. Let's just, okay. Let's all just take a little breather here. We're going to do a little guess the verdict, and then we're going to do some situations. We're going to go back to BPD town. We're going to do some guess the verdict. Here we go, folks. AITA for appropriating the word sober. Appropriating the word sober. Can I get an origin? Reddit. Yes, that is from Reddit, folks.
Yeah, that kind of makes me think of someone who's like, oh, I'm so bipolar because I changed my mind about this, just kind of casual language. And so I have to think of someone of the general public, because that doesn't honestly bother me. Like, unless someone in the group has a problem with it and is hurt by the language, you know. I'm gonna say NaH.
NaH is right.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Sarah has a competitor. So here's the story. OP apparently doesn't drink or rarely drinks. I'm not exactly clear, but they like to just tell people they're sober. And then some coworker was like, oh, you're taking that word away from people who are actually addicts. And then OP was like, I'm not trying to seek validation. It's just the best way to shut down coworkers asking for drinks. Top comment, Blurg Machine 327. No assholes here. I don't necessarily think that either of you are in the wrong. You're using very specific language. Sober for 2 years. That does typically denote being in recovery. Many people in the recovery community are protective of that verbiage because it does carry a lot of weight for them. Yeah, I actually think that's no assholes here. I mean, I have a friend who's much more conventional alcoholic than me, and you know, we just have very different rules, which I've realized, and my other sober friends tend to, like, I'll drink non-alcoholic beer, and generally people in recovery don't. So I don't know. I think it's fine to use as a tool, but then if anyone clarifies, you should just be honest and transparent, you know, that you're just like, oh, I'm just saying sober, but actually da-da-da.
I completely agree. Okay, would I be the asshole for adopting only 3 of our 4 foster daughters?
Oh my God, yes, YTA. Come on, man. You got to get the whole litter. That's insane.
You would think, but no.
Of course.
So
losing once again.
So this family has had these 4 daughters since they were very young. They're teenagers now. According to the law, the family has to approve adoption, even if the family itself does not want to adopt the kid. 3 families said yes. The 4th daughter's family said no. He still wants to adopt the 3 daughters, but the 4th one is experiencing some abandonment, and he's struggling with how to go about this. So the top comment is from Wicked Lucky 214, NTA, maybe set an adoption date on her 18th birthday. Make a huge deal about it.
Okay. Well, wrong again. AITA for telling my GF 21F that our life is no vacation.
Ooh, I almost want to say NaH again because that feels just like 2 different perspectives, but I don't know if you're that tricky. Fuck it, NaH.
NaH is wrong. So, OP and GF have created a sort of van life. You know, these van-dwelling people?
Oh, no,
Speaking of personality disorders, what are you guys doing? Get out of the van. Anyway, so OP works remotely, and so the deal was that they were going to go in the van for a year, I guess. It's not abundantly clear the financial status here, but whatever. OP's working. She says she's going to be an animator illustrator, and OP's kind of like working, and, you know, he says it's very hard to work because there's so many distractions. And no shit, you live in a van.
Right.
I'm sure distractions are like, our van sucks. She won't do shit. She won't even do a tutorial. So he starts to get like kind of flustered because he's like, why is she squandering this time? And that's why he ends up saying that our life is no vacation. Togar sucks with the top comment, ESH.
Oh no, I should have gone for that one.
NaH ESH paradox. You guys planned a year off the grid with you fully funding the entire thing. Okay, so I guess he is fully funding it. I reread it, but whatever. There's an agreement that she works on herself and toward her goals while you pay for it. The problem is the 2 of you had different expectations of what that meant. She isn't progressing and becoming an artist, but unless you had established a specific timeline for things she would complete or achieve, you had to have known this was a likely possibility. I don't know. I'm kind of like, she's being disrespectful. If that was the deal, then, and she's not upholding her part of the deal. He wasn't just paying for her to be on vacay. He was paying for her to better herself.
Yeah, it's definitely not no assholes here, but I don't know if he sucks exactly.
He seems a little controlling, but I'm like, well, if she's doing nothing, like, why does there need to be a specific timeline? Like, she said she would do it. She hasn't done a single tutorial. I know enough to know that's 0. Come on, she's doing nothing.
Yeah, and he's contributing everything.
Yeah, like, that was the deal. Like, I don't know. I think that's rude.
Yeah,
If he was on her all the time, like, when are you gonna do this? When are you gonna do this? I'd be like, yeah, he's being crazy. But if to just be on her to start to do a single thing, I'm like, no, that seems very valid.
I agree.
So here we go. 1-0, your lead.
AITA for giving a 3-year-old beer.
I'm gonna say no assholes here.
Ooh, no, you're wrong.
God damn it. I'm losing again, people.
So, this guy's at a barbecue. His little 3-year-old niece comes up and says, "What are you drinking?" He's like, "Beer." She's like, "Can I have some?" And he's like, "Okay, you're going to hate it. It's fine. It'll be funny." He pours her a little bit into her sippy cup. She tries it. Oh no, she likes it. So she asks for more. He says no. She goes around and like asks everybody, "Hey, can I have some beer?" And they're like, "Why do you want beer?" And it comes out that he gave her beer.
We literally did this before. Now I feel like a double idiot.
Oh no, that's what I was afraid of. So
I got it wrong anyway. This is so embarrassing. This is so embarrassing.
Oh no. Top comment from Tamatil. Honestly, yeah, YTA. Don't be giving other people's young toddlers beer, my guy.
Wild.
Yeah, right?
Well, Nicci has won once again. We got a couple juicy stitches for you folks today. Our second story of the day. AITA for creating a meat eaters only club at work. But first, AITA for not forgiving my former best friend for all the horrible things she did after finding out she was diagnosed with, you guessed it, borderline personality disorder. I was best friends with this girl for about 4 years before we decided to become housemates. After about a year of living together, she started to get regular mood swings and would turn into the worst human. Rude, condescending, spiteful. There's so many things I could list. The worst thing she did let a stray cat into the house when I had a beloved pet mouse that lived in a large fish tank with no roof. I came home to its dismembered body scattered around my room. Roommate did not apologize. She also accidentally locked me in the garage for 2 hours.
Oh my god!
I don't know why that's funny to me. It wasn't an accident. She was getting back at me for taking the wrong bins out on bin night. Again, no apology. It got to a point where I would have panic attacks about coming home and would wait on the street for hours at night until I could tell from the lights in the house that she had gone to bed, so I would avoid seeing her and be berated by her for anything small I had done. Okay, I think I'm laughing because can't you just open the garage door? I don't know what kind of garage this is, but I would think there's a way to exit.
Yeah,
Anyways.
I feel like there's several ways to get in or out of a garage if it's your garage, but...
Right? Generally, but whatever, we'll play it as it lays. OP goes on. At this point, our relationship was ruined. Our lease came to an end, and I thankfully was able to move out with my boyfriend. She moved back home. Shortly after this, I heard from our other friend she was diagnosed with BPD. I did some research and the symptoms match her behavior, and my friends have been heavily pressuring me to rekindle our relationship because of this. They all witnessed her rude and horrible behavior, but not to the extent I experienced it as we were living together. Our friendship group has been split apart because of this, and the blame has shifted to me as I refuse to have anything to do with this girl anymore. Yet they think she should be forgiven because of her diagnosis. She apologized to all of us in a group chat for her behavior, even though she was by far the worst to me. I was the only one who did not forgive her. My friends think I should. AITA.
So, going back to that friendship, I did reach out to her after we hadn't talked, after I was diagnosed. And I said, "Hey, I just want to apologize. I was diagnosed with this. This explains a lot of my behaviors. I'm sorry I hurt you. It had nothing to do with you, and I'm sorry I made you feel that it did." She took some time to respond, but she responded and said, "Thank you for telling me." And I responded again, kind of hoping we could rekindle our friendship. And she was like, "No, I don't want that." And that was a really hard lesson to learn. But that lesson is you are under no obligation to ever forgive someone who has hurt you, no matter what they're diagnosed with, no matter their reasons for hurting you. If someone hurts you, you do not need to forgive them. I understand that it's putting her in a weird spot with her friend group, but they didn't experience the trauma she went through. She saw her pet's body parts in the living room because her roommate was careless. Like, it's obviously an NTA. Sorry, it's not more juicy on my end, but that...
Well, it's interesting. We've talked about forgiveness before. I guess I have the thought that forgiving is very different from letting back into your life. I seek to forgive all. I don't like to hold a grievance or nothing. So I guess I'm just wondering, when I look at, things people have done to me and shits people have done to me, I really do focus. I think it just helps me let go. Because I guess here's what it is. It's not that I don't want to actually forget, right? I don't actually want to forgive and forget, not so literally. I just don't want to think about it. And I know that if I genuinely am able to see why they did what they did, and honestly, being diagnosed with a BPD is a very satisfying answer. You're like, oh, well, yeah, there's the answer there.
It wasn't just me being an awful trash person. There was a reason for my behaviors, and now I can find a solution so I don't do this in the future.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's on your end. I mean, I think one of the reasons that this is probably very confusing for her, and you could tell me, is that, when I've had interactions with people who are kind of cluster B, narcissist, or borderline, it's very hard to have this person in your mind because, probably you are a wonderful person even most of the time. And so then when you have these incidents, it's like, what's going on here? Where's the person that I love? Where'd they go? Who's this other person?
And when you live with someone, that's a very intimate relationship where you spend a lot of time together. And so you absolutely will see the worst of each other. And someone with untreated borderline is their worst is very bad.
Yeah, I mean that's why I read all these books and stuff, because it honestly it creates a lot of doubt and confusion in the other person, because it's very, because a more neurotypical person, like, yes, obviously I have a bad side and I can have a meltdown, etc. But I think it's with the extent that goes much farther, especially if it's untreated, like you said. And that creates a lot of unrest in that person, because they can start to wonder, oh, am I a monster? Is there something wrong with me? And it becomes very hard to understand this other person. Mm-hmm. So, but going back to my main thread here, I think for me, I love what you said. I think what you said is true. I'm 100% on board. You don't have to let anyone back into your life. That's just a simple boundary you're allowed to set. But for me, I seek to forgive. I seek to understand and forgive, because that allows me to forget, not like an amnesia, but also just to not bother with. And one thing that I frankly sought to do and found myself doing, which I like this about myself, when I go back to past relationships in my head, I'm like, I got really nothing but positive things to say, because why not? Why would I have anything bad to say about that person? It's like, there's really no reason, so that I just feel like it's rational to just go back and be like, well, let's pick the greatest hits. I mean, look, and that's with anything. That could be a friendship that ended, a breakup, anything. I'm like, why would I sit here and talk about what's wrong with that person when I know I had great interactions with them? And, why do anything but that? That's how I feel.
Yeah, most of the time I am all for finding a solution, finding peace, apologizing, forgiveness, moving on. But there are a handful of people I can count on one hand or less of people who have genuinely hurt me or betrayed me or done something that I do consider unforgivable. And no amount, well, my therapist actually told me you don't need to forgive those people, but no amount of people explaining why forgiveness is important would be enough for me to be like, this would put me more at peace. I just want them out of sight, out of mind. Most of the time.
We have the same goal though, right? Because you're shooting for out of mind as well, and that is ultimately, I feel like, what I achieve. And by understanding them and forgiving them, for me, it's like, I don't know, that lets me put them out of my mind. So it sounds like we have the same goal. We get at it at a different way.
You have a good approach, and I try to use that approach whenever possible, but there are those few instances where it's just like, there will be no forgiving.
But yeah, I do think this is a no-brainer. I mean, I don't think it's ever really an excuse, and people are saying the same in the comments. Iodine Sky 111 NTA IBPD. I would never behave this way. Her impulsive behavior can be explained by a diagnosis, but her lack of remorse for your pet, not even able to apologize, speaks to me as a shitty person. Sure, well, those are shitty things. I don't know if we need to call her a shitty person. Shard Merm, I have BPD and NPD, so that's borderline and narcissist, the covert kind. I've ruined plenty of relationships before I got the tools to deal with them. While I have many regrets and I was diagnosed this way because of an abusive childhood, it's on me to get better and break the chain of harm. People don't have to forgive me anything. Wow. I really got to eat my words here, because it seems like there's a lot of people who had these symptoms, conditions, etc., and have improved tremendously, which is wonderful to hear.
Do I have a secret Reddit account? Was that me who posted that? Like, I could relate to that entirely. Oh my gosh. Except for the
Yeah.
narcissistic part. Nothing wrong with that. Like, I just don't have that personally.
Pandean panic. Most BPD people I know, including me, would never behave this way regarding lack of remorse, etc. I'm gonna guess she's just a shitty person. Wow, another shitty person. Well, anyway, I think we see eye to eye on this. I think it's a no-brainer. I mean, look, for me, I like to understand. I like to know. I certainly would like to know, and I think we're differing on what forgiveness means or how it can be achieved. But I don't think anyone owes forgiveness to anybody else. Certainly, I don't really think we disagree in any substantial way.
Yeah, it's good to forgive. But it's not necessarily required if it's not helpful for your healing.
Totally. AITA for not forgiving my former best friend after finding out she was diagnosed with BPD. We agree. Not the asshole, and the friend is.
Yes.
All right. This is a vegetarian-oriented one. You love to see it. I haven't seen something like this in some time. AITA for creating a meat eaters only club at work. I, 32M, am working long hours in a stuffy office. However, despite the long hours, the management has encouraged lifestyle clubs at work. Book club, movie lovers club, anyone's free to join. They're partially subsidized by the company. Makes joining a no-brainer. The process is simple. You need 5 members willing to join, statement of purpose, approval from HR and upper management. It's got to be compliant with our rules, whatever. At my workplace, I'll have a colleague I'll call Jane, 29F, who's been at the office for over a year. She's a vegan and has been since I've known her. Never been an issue, not even relevant. Well, after a merger about 6 months ago, our team has received a number of new team members. A few of them were vegan as well. They took a liking to Jane. After a convo between them and Jane discussing the book club, they decided to start vegan dinner club. Nobody had an issue. Despite this, issue surfaced after their statement of purpose became known. In the statement, which passed with HR, one of the rules stated that only vegans, vegetarians, and pescatarians will be welcome, and that all dinner options will be vegan. This rubbed some of us the wrong way since it was exclusionary and divisive. Why would meat eaters be excluded if only vegan options would be on the menu? After speaking to Jane, she seemed distant and mentioned that I didn't understand that this was also a lifestyle club. The workplace became divided. But we opted not to file a complaint to HR. However, since the idea of a dinner club appealed, we started Burger and Steak Club, where we wanted to try a different burger or steak every week. In our statement of purpose, we stated that only meat eaters could apply due to this being both a culinary and lifestyle club. Soon after, some of the potential members got called to HR to tell us the members of the Vegan Diner Club filed a complaint with them, stating that our club was exclusionary, offensive to their lifestyle, and that eating meat was not a lifestyle. Despite this, the club passed with HR. In the weeks following, we visited a different burger steak place and just relaxed after working 50 hours a week. However, despite my prior friendship with Jane, she now refuses to talk to me and is only spending time with her club members. Despite everyone's attempt to create a friendly workplace, AITA for creating a meat eaters only club at work.
I'm not going to assume this guy is straight, but I have a feeling at some point in his life he said, "Why isn't there a straight pride parade?"
Yeah, for real. This is kind of funny, but I ultimately... to me, it's clear to me that he's not really listening to Jane, and I find that frustrating.
He's literally like, well, I can't be a part of your club, so I'm going to make a club you can't be a part of.
Well, I don't like Jane either, because I don't like why can't anybody else come to the club? If veganism is a moral imperative for you, then why wouldn't you want to promote it by giving people vegan food? That's like a very common thing to do. So the fact that she would open the club in an exclusionary way makes me think that either she's not vegan for ethical reasons or she doesn't give a fuck to evangelize it. And so that she is actually just being exclusionary, which is her right. Mm-hmm. However, then he has every right to start an exclusionary club if that's the way this is set up.
I'm not saying, I'm not saying he's wrong for for having his club, but it's possible the reason she decided to make it vegans, vegetarians, and pescatarians only is because the other guys or people in the office who eat meat are the kind that would react to that kind of club and make a burger and steak club. The thing is, people have different reasons for changing their diets. Personally, I'm a pescatarian and I even barely eat seafood because I just had a manic episode while cuddling with my cat one morning about a year ago. And I just decided that because I didn't want any harm to come to my pets, I should try to live in a way that would reduce the harm for other living things. That's my personal choice. I don't feel super strongly about other people eating meat. I'm not trying to convert people. But I understand that there is a certain company that you you can expect when you have a choice you make due to compassionate or ethical reasons. So if you're wanting to be a vegetarian and have a vegetarian only club because you kind of don't want the type of people who will talk about meat or who don't necessarily share those compassionate viewpoints. A lot of vegans also won't wear leather or won't consume other products tested on animals, stuff like that. So it isn't just a diet thing. It's more of a lifestyle when it comes to those for the most part. And I think the Burger and Steak Club is just kind of like a haha, well, we can't be a part of your club, so we're going to have our own. And I think that's exactly the kind of attitude and behavior she was trying to avoid by making it a little more exclusionary.
Yeah, but I don't really feel, I feel like it, look, from the employer perspective, people want to eat, they want to eat what they want to eat, and now everyone's allowed to eat whatever they want to eat. I am with you that it's not really the same, that the meat eaters excluded the peskies and the veggies, but you know, how can I really blame them? That seems like a double standard. And I do agree that there are kind of vibes of like straight pride here and basically a group that's not a group, but like, you know, frankly, it's a burger and steak club. Like, that is what it is. So I don't know. I think it's rude, but like, it doesn't seem to me like OP references a prior friendship with Jane, and now she refuses to talk to him. So, but isn't that really what Jane has been up to this whole time? She's been trying to exclude OP. She's been not welcoming people. She has not been trying to create a bridge. I respect that, but I can't fault OP then for starting his meat eaters club.
I mean, no, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this club. This may come as a surprise. I don't think either one of them are assholes, honestly. I think it's just petty. And like, they work in an office, they need to grow up. But I mean, they have as much right to their plant-based group as they have to their meat group. They both follow the rules of the company. And so it's kind of funny. They're just being petty like idiots because of not agreeing on this. But I would say no assholes here, honestly.
I'm leaning that way. I mean, I guess I just want to say that I feel like if Jane had let everyone be included, then she could have been filling up a lot of people with vegan food. And so her very exclusion is ultimately what led to the creation of the Burger and Steak Club, which is fine. But like, just from her moral point of view, which I would guess is to reduce meat consumption, excluding people seems to be the wrong move. So, but I don't think that makes her an asshole. I think that makes her ineffective if that's her goal. But if it's more what you said and she just doesn't want the vibe, the bro vibes, and she wants to have a nice time at her club, then, you know, then great.
Yeah, some people also take veganism beyond just a diet. It is a lifestyle. It is a way to live, a way you make choices on what to buy and what to do. And so Burger and Steak Club doesn't have that same sense of community. I do agree that she could have opened it up to people who are okay eating vegan, maybe open some minds, maybe reduce meat consumption. But I don't fault her for making it exclusive to meat-free people, just like I don't fault him for being like, well, I want a club where I can eat food all the time.
Yeah.
I think that's what it came down to. Like, well, I mean, I can get free meals too. Let's do this kind of thing.
There we go. No, I can't disagree with that. AITA for creating a meat eaters only club at work. I think we agree. No assholes here. All right, folks, we're going to wrap up on a BPD sitch here. AITA for defending myself about BPD. Little history. I was diagnosed with BPD in my early 20s. Unsurprising, given my personal history. I'd had a messed up childhood and was already diagnosed with a handful of neurological mental illnesses. I was in a bad place, severe drinking, self-harming, suicidal ideation. I was also a terrible, horrible person to live with. I take full accountability for that. Regardless of the mental pain I was in, there's no excuse for my behavior during those years. I was absolutely the asshole, and I'm not looking for redemption in that regard. Fast forward to my late 20s. I'm engaged to the wonderful woman who is now still my wife. She's American, I'm British, and she had just spent 4 years earning a degree in the UK. We're talking about me moving back to America with her, but she's frank with me. If I don't get my act together, it won't work out. At the time, I'm filled with despair and self-loathing, but I know she's right, so I do the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. I admit I need help and get help. Wow. I spent 6 months in an intensive DBT program, which is a very specific therapy that is known for being effective for borderline. spilling out my guts, facing some very hard truths, and ultimately rebuilding myself from the ground up. First few months were agonizing, but halfway through, I had a major breakthrough. I even stopped drinking. I'd be getting blackout drunk every weekend. Went 18 months without touching a drop. I applied my new skills to my relationship, and by the time the 6 months was over, I had stopped self-harming and acting out and was dealing with upsets and disappointments like an adult instead of throwing a toddler tantrum. It was hard work, but the payoff, amazing. Fast forward to today. I'm living in America with my wife, and I haven't relapsed. We're happy. I'm proud of my wife for standing by me through it all, and I'm proud of myself for getting here. I'm far from perfect. I fight my demons daily, but they don't win anymore, which leads me to the AITA. Okay, so that was just a preamble. I often run into people, mostly online, but IRL too, commenting about people with BPD, saying they're irredeemable psychopaths and they're malicious and sadistic and they like hurting people, so they'll never change. And it stings me. I have had people suddenly turn on me when we're talking about our backgrounds and I mentioned the BPD. I don't volunteer it all the time, just when talking about health. Suddenly they don't trust me and they want to know how many partners I've quote unquote been through. Just the one, by the way. Wife is the only person I've ever been in a serious relationship with, and I've known her since we were teens. So AITA, if I defend myself in those situations, I'm acutely hurt that some people have been badly hurt by people with personality disorders, and I don't want to diminish that. On the other hand, being told I'm a monster and a disgusting, sadistic psychopath by people who believe I'm irredeemable just because I have had a mental illness is painful, especially after fighting so hard to better myself. So AITA, if I say I worked hard to overcome my BPD and people with personality disorders aren't necessarily lost causes. I've been accused of, quote, still being BPD because you're craving validation because of it, and it puts me in a weird spot. I don't want to disagree that, yes, we're all horrible people, but standing up for myself about it seems to make people upset. Asshole judgment, please.
So I have a few comments. One, I was half expecting him to be like, I even locked this roommate in my garage for 2 hours.
It was just 2 hours, and there was another way out. She just couldn't find it.
Right.
Come on.
The remote was right there. It's not my fault. No. Once again, I'm kind of like, did I write this? Because I have been in this situation where I don't actively offer the information because it is very stigmatized. It is very misunderstood, and there are a lot of people who don't treat themselves or don't care about hurting other people, and when they do hurt people, they really hurt people. So that kind of bleeds into the perception of what BPD is and how people with BPD live and treat other people. If I was in this situation, I normally just like, okay, like, sure, you can have that assumption, you can say that, but like, you're talking to me, you know I'm not like this, like, so you're wrong. People with borderline aren't like this. It's a symptom of borderline, and that's... So I guess, personally, I'm not invested enough in, like, being like, well, I'm not like that, but I absolutely am in favor of him being like, look, I was like this, I got better, people do this all the time, you know, this isn't what you think is wrong, and I am proof of that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's a lot of emotional labor, and if he's up for that, good on him. But personally, I'm just like, okay, you can think that, like, fine. But clearly I'm not like that, and clearly many people with borderline are not like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a very tough thing. I suspect that the origin of these views does likely come from victimization at the hands of these individuals. You know, I mean, that's where it comes from me, right? Where I'm like, oh, well, it's, you know, there's really nothing that can be done. I'm saying these things because it's sort of easier potentially to upset these things. It's easier to other these people if you were the victim of a relationship with one. I'm talking about really anyone with a personality disorder, right? It's just, you reach this, you yourself are coping, right? Yeah. And how do you cope? Well, you say, well, they're an irredeemable monster, and it is a form of othering, right? Because you're like, well, they're part of a group of people who have personality disorders, and those people operate like them, and I'm not one of them, and whatever, they're broken, or whatever it may be, and all of that is much like the disorders themselves, a coping mechanism. And I think I think these people are being ignorant, and right off the bat, I've had to back off a lot because I think I came at you saying some of these things, but as we've progressed, I've had to be like, well, no, that's not really true. A lot of people identify as borderline and have identified making a tremendous amount of progress. So clearly there is, it's not, that's what it is. It's, it's being monolithic, and it's being like everyone who has this disorder is like this, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's an incredibly hard disorder to live with. And it's a lot of hard work to live in a way that is stable, and you can have healthy relationships and have, like, I keep using that phrase, but have like a stable life.
Well, yeah, and in the context of the healthcare system here, I'm sure that a large number of people are potentially even aware or would benefit from therapy and don't really have the resources for it. Like America.
I learned about borderline from a random, like, almost like BuzzFeed type article about what Disney characters or Disney villains have what mental illnesses, and it was just like kind of a goofy article. But I was reading about borderline and it sounded familiar, and so that's when I reached out to my therapist and I was like, hey, can we talk about this? And after going more in depth about it and going through the symptoms, it was found out that I had it. So even just lack of education, I mean, I had seen my therapist for a while, and she even was like, she needed that prompting to be like, oh yes, this is something we can explore, because we were already treating me for the other things I have. But even just not being aware that it exists can be extremely detrimental and make it impossible to get help.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing that you saw yourself in it. You were able to reflect that. I mean, I think that's another property of these, conditions, is that if you're not really open, if somebody accuses you of having something, but you don't have the insight in the reflection, which I think you did, I think if you hadn't taken the BuzzFeed quiz, you still probably would have eventually figured it out. But in the end, being self-aware and reflective and willing to think about how you've affected people is kind of key to any kind of diagnosis, unless you're like low functioning or something, but even still,
And that friendship I mentioned earlier ending was fresh on my mind when I read that. And I think that's what really made the connection. I was like, this explains a lot. Let's look into this more.
It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it is messed up, irredeemable. Somebody said they're irredeemable psychopaths. They're malicious and sadistic, and they like hurting people. I'm not really comfortable with these things. I don't like to think of people this way, because, like I said, and I don't know, this is just how I process this. Is I think, well, it looks like malice and might look like sadism and whatever it may be, but like, I just don't think that's what it's made of. I try to really think about when I'm thinking about these people is I think about that they were children. They were children, and horrible things happened to them. And when I go there, it's so much easier to be like, oh, well, yeah, rather than to paint these terrible words on them, instead to just fixate on a child who had to behave a certain way to survive, essentially to emotionally survive. And that just helps me, forgive and forget. Because if I think of it that way and I kind of, they're malicious, then I don't know, that just doesn't do anything for me. Because I want to believe that people are all good. And if they're not all good, then at least that we're all trying our best.
Yeah.
To be good people. And I do believe that.
Yeah, those words, I think, are very clearly from someone who has been hurt deeply by someone with borderline. And
yeah.
Something I was going to mention earlier, it's a little off topic, but Ariana Grande, when she dated Pete Davidson, he actually got a lot of hate, and a lot of people like tweeted at her being like, don't you know he has borderline? Be careful, he's a villain, and like all this stuff. And he had to come out and be like, no, like, I have it, yes, but you're wrong about what it is or what it always has to be. And
right.
I think, yeah, someone like that, I think, could benefit from having a conversation like the conversations we have, where someone acknowledges the pain they've been through and acknowledges that they've been betrayed by someone they cared about and someone treated them so awfully. But that's not the only person with borderline out there. It's not one size fits all. There are people who have done the work, who are aware, who are accountable, like me, who exist, who are very different from someone who's untreated or unwilling to get treatment. and it's just such a wide spectrum of how it manifests that they clearly have no one in their life that is a contrast to the person who has hurt them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm happy we're doing this up so that people can learn that, that it is treatable and things can happen and it can be managed and you can make progress, And I think it is toxic. Look, I think it's toxic I think it's pretty much universally toxic, right? Like to make monoliths of groups, and that obviously manifests as stereotypes. And that's really what this is, right? It's a stereotype. It's like, well, they're unchanging and they're sadistic and they're evil and da-da-da-da-da. And, this is just an extreme distortion of reality. And it's closing your mind and it's insulting to people who have done the work.
It's almost like the polar opposite of the people who use terms like, oh, I'm so OCD because I need to have the radio
right.
at a certain...
Right.
Like, polar opposites, but... Yeah, kind of that whole like not understanding.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's and maybe there's a reason too that we go to such extremes. Right now it's like, gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss, and it's like, oh, I guess gaslighting's funny. It's like there's on the one side this dilution, everyone's a narcissist, and then on the other side it's kind of a polarization, Everyone who has narcissistic personality disorder or BPD is an evil monster, but on the other hand, everyone has it, which it's like, yeah, I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, the amount of dating profiles that come across that like either men listing themselves as like toxic or stuff like that, like it's a good thing or something that should attract people. A lot of my interactions with other people with borderline are women. I'm a part of a Facebook group that shares a lot of memes, and it's like, oh yeah, this is bad behavior, but like we've all experienced it, and it's a nice little community. But I think not to be completely gender, but I think that shows two very different approaches to bad behavior, taking accountability, being like, yeah, this is me, it sucks, but like I'm aware of it, and oh, I'm toxic, like, oh, I'm a bad boy, like all that stuff. It's just like it's hard to navigate the world when you're mentally ill or you have people you care about or you're close to who are mentally ill, because there's just so much misinformation and uninformation. And I'm really glad we decided to do this episode. I should get some interesting responses when I link my friends and family, but I think I'm pretty happy with everything I've said here and what I've put out there.
I'm happy too. Thank you for being vulnerable and thank you for sharing your experience. I mean, it's, we've talked a lot about this, but I think even talking this much more, I have really, I don't know, it just felt really humanizing, because I think ultimately I'll drop the T word. I think when you get traumatized by being in a relationship with someone like this, it is easy to slip into a monolithic and stereotypical view of the world, and that is trauma, right? Like that is trauma. You're closing your mind
to protect yourself from more trauma.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Brilliantly put. And so I don't know what the opposite of trauma is, but I feel it right now. Maybe it's catharsis. I don't know if we have a word for that, but it's just like, yeah,
peace. Maybe
it feels good. Peace. That's what I'm trying to do. Not forgive and forget. Just have some freaking peace. Our sponsor today, Jerry's Big Cakes. I'm just kidding. Guys, that's it.
I was so excited for you. I was like, oh my gosh. Cakes.
Nicci, thank you so much for doing the episode. I haven't plugged the whole time, so I just want to say Nicci is one of our executive producers. So she's pretty much allowed to do whatever she wants, and doing full episodes like this. And I mean, it just so happens that she's a fascinating person. I'd be happy to do this either way.
Aww.
But I'm just telling you, if you want to do it, then join our Patreon, patreon.com/AITA pod. Please rate, review, and subscribe. Much love. We'll see you on the flip. And that's all for now.